Welcome to Stand By Please.
With me, Antonia Collins from the Bamboo Manager Project.
And me, Jackie George from Sharjah Performing Arts Academy.
In this podcast, we talk all things stage management. Join us and our guests as we try to answer the question, what is your stage manager really thinking?
Stage management boundaries has been a slightly overworked topic in the last year, in the sense that it's cropped up a lot.
Yeah.
And of course, the reason it's cropped up a lot is because we haven't really been doing any stage management. And so there's been an opportunity to reflect on some of the practices that maybe aren't so good and things that people should say no to. And, you know, the working hours being one of them, the lack of breaks being another, you know. But I still felt like I wanted to unpack boundaries a bit further as a concept. And I thought maybe we should try and unpack them in two ways. One to do about boundaries in work, and one to do about personal boundaries.
And when you talk about work boundaries, do you mean your or an individual's personal work boundaries, or do you mean the boundaries that people expect to break with a stage manager, as in they expect above and beyond? Or
yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking, is the difference between the work and the personal things, in the sense that the work boundaries should be set up in your contractual agreement. I mean, written down parts of that contract that are going to be in play. So obviously, if you're on an equity contract, there are guidelines, aren't there? You work X amount of hours, as you get overtime, you meant to have an hour's break, those travel days, those kind of things. So really, those kind of things should exist.
yes.
But they don't.
Okay. So what would be in that annex, so to speak, that would manage those boundaries? What sort of things spring to mind, or do you feel are the biggest boundary crosses?
There should be rules that mean you don't work over a certain amount of hours a week. The rules are there. They're not should be. They are there, and yet we all do, and that's accepted as that's okay. And we all eat half a sandwich and go to a production meeting when we should be on an hour's break. And I know what the production manager will say, and I know what the producer will say. They'll say, oh, well, we don't need you to come to the production meeting, so you should have your hour's break. But that's ridiculous, isn't it? Because, you know, actually all of the stage management need to be in the production meeting. Nobody's free, unless you've got several ASMs. That's the only example I can think of. But I think, like, with the work boundaries, they should exist and they don't. With the personal boundaries, they don't exist and you have to create your own.
I like that way of looking at it. Okay, so if we come back to the personal boundaries, that they don't exist, but we should create our own. Let's come back to that in a second. The work ones, okay, absolutely. Equity would be our go-to marker, depending on what contract, whether it's sub-rep or commercial, whatever it may be, that's our marker. And then, you know, we go sliding scale of ITC, whatever it may be. So those guidelines are in place, and even companies who maybe aren't on those ITC registers, etc., say we will work to ITC guidelines. If then you are on an equity contract and those boundaries are set out, as in hours, as in when you are accessible for work, who is to blame? Who puts the pressure on you to do those hours? Is it partly like yourself as an individual, as a stage manager, so you go, oh, I can't have my whole sandwich because I need to finish doing that job before the text session starts again? Or is it, I don't know, is it subconsciously coming from production manager / producer? I don't know.
I'm going to refer to a webinar it's a panel that took part in. The topic was stage management boundaries, and I was the only Brit on the panel. So it was me and 8 other American stage managers. Yeah. And one of them said something absolutely brilliant. And I can't remember quite what he said. I should have gone back to look at it. But basically that all stage managers have got some weird kind of savior complex. That means that we have to go the extra mile and we have to eat half a sandwich and we have to do all these things because we believe that nobody else is capable of doing them. Well, and at the time, I was a bit like, well, I'm not sure that's true. And now I've had a little bit of a chance to reflect on it. I was like, oh, I feel like I might have been guilty of that. So I think you're right. I think it's a combination of things that we kind of put it on ourselves. You know, we've talked about perfectionism before at great length, to go that extra mile and make the best job out of it. But then the flip side of that is something that we talked about only last week, and the fact that most people are freelancers. And so you want to go the extra mile to prove to that production manager and producer that they should employ you next time. But really, when we think about it, working through your lunch break, it's a good example because everybody's done it. It's just a bit of a weird thing, isn't it? Of course you're allowed to eat and go and see some daylight.
Yes. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that first and foremost, maybe the majority of the time it's ourselves that puts that pressure on and says, well, I've got to get the job done, or if I don't do a good job, they're not going to employ me next time. And then the production manager / producer, whoever it may be, buys into that generosity and maybe does a little bit of you should go and take a break, but then doesn't argue too much. And I've witnessed situations where there's maybe somebody who's viewed as a more difficult member of the team because they will be, well, I'm going to go away for an hour, or they'll purposely leave the building so they're not, contactable, or, you can't ask them a question or speak to them, and then they might not be looked on favourably for the next job or role. I've absolutely seen that in practice.
Well, and I think there's a flip side issue to it, which again I hadn't thought of until I did that seminar. I think it might have been the same stage manager said, when you do those things, when you work through a lunch break, you are basically saying to the producer, that's okay. So everybody can do that then, right?
Yes.
And I've never thought about it in those terms. I've always said, oh, well, if I'm here working, I can't go anywhere. It's not like you can do anything, is it? Do you know what I mean? Like, unless you're close to town and you want to pop to the shops to take something back or whatever. But most of the time you're kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to eat a sandwich at my desk anyway, and I might as well just finish this off while I do that.
Yeah.
And I've always said, well, that's my choice and I choose to do that. But at the same time, am I then preventing, without meaning to, but am I preventing other people from having a choice because I've been all grand about it, said, oh, no, I can do that, don't worry. And I was reading, I think it was in the New York Times, the article about the Broadway producer that's been in the papers this week. And there was an assistant there who had a medical condition that meant she needed to exercise for 30 minutes every day. And apparently it was signed off that she could officially exercise between like 5:30 in the morning and 6 a.m. What? Anyway, let's get over that. And then, of course, they broke the contract all the time and said she couldn't go and exercise and she couldn't do those things. But by me saying I'll work through my lunch break, which is what I'm saying, am I unconsciously hindering other people?
Even if I am happy to work through a lunch break, even if I am happy to take a phone call after everyone's logged off. There are some situations, you know, if it's an emergency, absolutely, you'd want to be contacted if you're in that position, a company manager. But I don't need to take a call to remind you what time your call is tomorrow, past a certain hour. We know it's not just about working through your lunch hour or how hard working you are. Cross over into your personal boundaries. And how you manage those is really interesting.
A million years ago, I worked as a casual in the New Theatre Cardiff. I was an electrics casual. And the New Theatre... Electrics, yeah. I went to college to be an electrician. Yeah, anyway, that's a whole other podcast. And they had a clocking in and out machine because they were owned by the council. It was I assume, I don't even know whether it's still there. But that clocking in and out machine, of course, meant that people finished at the end of their shift and that they took breaks because they weren't going to get paid them. So I always thought the clocking in and out machine was a bad idea. You know, I always thought about, you know, you get more out of people if you don't have that kind of machine involved, because what happened some days was people stood around said clocking in and out machine and waited for it to tick to the required time and then clocked out. You didn't get a minute, you know, because it bred that kind of behavior, you know, totally understandably. But then most theatre jobs are the opposite end of the spectrum to that. And is it because we have that very blurry line between it's a job and it's a vocation and it's a, you know, it's fun. Sometimes it's fun. A lot of the time it can be fun. You know,
I'm the first one to say, well, it's a lifestyle. It's not a job. It's not a 9 to 5. Oh, I'm contradicting myself. Absolutely contradicting myself. But it's not. You have to do it. Maybe that's where the boundaries are. You have to do it because you enjoy it. Because I say, you know, if you don't enjoy it, then you could go off and do something that you don't enjoy for a lot more money.
One of the rules that I really like, that we do mainly work to, and I'm worried that after Brexit we might lose, is the 10-hour overnight break, because that was a European Union thing.
It was a working time directive, wasn't it?
It was the old working time directive.
So when we talk about personal boundaries that don't exist but we have to instigate, where do you start?
Oh, with the phone. With the phone. I love it. I love what smartphones have done for us work-wise. Absolutely, hand on heart. You know, when you teach in the classroom, you're talking to younger students and you try to explain how it used to be, you know,
yeah,
they're like, what? How did you do that?
My first freelance jobs, we had one computer that was dial-up internet in the corner that we all used to battle to get on. We had a payphone in the little kitchen next door, and when you started a show, you'd get given a payphone pay card that had like a £5 on it. So when I had had the yellow pages out, you'd be going through, what am I looking for? Oh, bed sheets. Okay. So you're ringing up all the bed sheets. And you'd use your phone card and you'd cross out on the yellow pages. It was like the old yellow pages ad. Remember? J.R. Hartley. You're so old. So it's revolutionized propping.
You had a pay card. My first job, I was given a bag of 20 pence pieces. And we used to finish rehearsal and we were in a church hall, and then I would go and ring the production manager with the things from the day with my 20 pence pieces. I mean, you know, but
this is
the
so
world
funny.
Didn't stop, did it? And there is a huge part of me, I mean, I don't want to do that again. Do you know what I mean? That's fine.
No.
But there's a huge part of me that misses those days of when we used to print off a rehearsal report, stick it in people's pigeonholes.
Yes, highlight. You go through the thing and you go, highlight ASF, highlight, lighting department, highlight. Oh my gosh, I missed that. No,
Well,
I don't.
I miss it because it meant that people didn't respond to anything until 9 a.m. the next
The
morning.
next morning.
I mean, why people feel the urge to reply to a rehearsal report at 10 p.m. at night, I literally have no idea.
No.
Because the technology allows us to, doesn't mean we should. When it comes to the phone, on day one of rehearsal, I normally say to the company, I will, feel free to message me if we're out of work hours and you think there's an issue, and I will decide whether or not I think it needs a response. And some of that I say because often I'm working with people at the beginning of their career. And maybe to them it feels like an emergency, but maybe I can make the decision that it can wait till tomorrow. But they're not sure what to do.
Yeah. Do you have the blue ticks turned on your WhatsApp?
Yes, I do have the blue ticks turned on. And it drives me insane when other people don't, including my number 2 son. But yes, I do. But that doesn't bother me. Do you know what I mean? I could literally be out at dinner. Somebody sends me a message about something. We read the message and put it down to one side.
But there was an article in the BBC this week about how, employers are ecstatic because actually work productivity is much higher with people working from home because there are no boundaries, because people will feel guilty. We've had conversations, about you might not be able to do your quota of work at a certain time because you might have homeschooling to deal with, or you're at home, you might have to share IT equipment, whatever it may be. Your internet's down for that hour, so and then you find other times. So instead of finishing work at a set time at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, you'll go, I've got to, I've been homeschooling today, so I'll do my bit of work in the evening. So those boundaries become even more blurred. But what some reports saying that the productivity of employees at home is much higher actually, because there's that pressure on individuals to go, I must make sure that I'm looking, I've done my work, that I'm not just, they don't think I'm sitting watching This Morning or whatever it may be. And then I think that's a real issue, and I've struggled with that certainly. There was a brilliant TED talk. I'll have to look up the guy's name in a second, but he talked about how actually, and when I listened to it, it made so much sense how you actually create those boundaries. And he was a psychologist, and he talked about how he realized he had to make those boundaries because work was infiltrating every bit of his non-work time. So, he'd go to a dinner party and he'd be thinking about something to do with work and not, fully present in the moment and speaking to his friends at the dinner party, or it would be keeping him up at night. And that's when it starts to affect your health and your well-being. And he's very systematic, very sort of psychologist approach. He journaled and he worked out that, in a given week, he was thinking about work outside of those hours for 14 hours. When it wasn't work time. And he talked about, and I've started to try and practice that. So even if you are, because people haven't been going to the office or they've been working at home and I think even as stage managers, it could help us because we do still think about, what the call is for tomorrow, or what the to-do list is, or what props we still haven't found. He said you have to have a physical clocking off, thinking about you going back to the new theatre time. So he said, you come home from work, or you have your designated work area and you get changed. So, you said still get dressed to go to work. And I know we've all had jokes about, sort of Zoom work clothes, what goes on in the top half, and your joggers are on or your pajama bottoms are on in the bottom half. But you get dressed for work, and when you finish work, you put your home clothes on and you have your designated work area. He said, no matter how small that is.
I think lots of the boundary stuff I'm kind of okay with. If I'm working with a team of people who respect one another and are polite. Do you know what I mean? I think my boundaries probably move dependent on how I feel about the behaviours of the people as well. Because there are definitely some people that I would say, no, I'm not replying to that email now. And there are other people that I would be like, oh yeah, I'll just ping them a quick answer and then they won't be worrying about it. Do you know what I mean? So I think
in the way that they've asked, or the way that they or expect something, whether they
probably the way in which they treat the stage management team. But do you know what I mean? There is nothing like somebody who's quite, it's not about demanding. I don't mean that. I mean somebody who's quite disrespectful of your work and what you do to make you be more militant about work hours. I think that is one of the myths we perpetrate, that we say, oh, well, I sent an email and then it's up to them whether they look at it. And you're like, no, you've sent it. You've still sent it. And I've, say you'd send it to me at 11 o'clock at night. Now it's different for us because we're in different time zones. So that complicates the issue.
I mean, I messaged you on a Sunday. I have actually. Sometimes I've messaged you about something on a Sunday and then I've gone, because for me, that's in my working week. And then I've gone, that was as really we've discussed, you're probably having your roast dinner and Yorkshire pudding and I'm talking to you about something about a podcast.
Yeah, but as we've just established, I have no boundaries, so it doesn't matter. But also, I think it's up to people like us to do better.
Yeah.
Because how can we expect somebody who's just graduated to do better if we're not? You can't.
You know that meme you shared today, which I love? I've seen it before, the one about those sort of passive-aggressive email responses. Like,
just checking in with you.
Just checking in. I do it. Hands up. Just checking in if you've had a chance to think about this or something like that is always the precursor. My other, I don't think it was in the meme, but my other one is, which goes back to that, I'm sending the email now. So it's off my list, but now it's on your plate. I have done it. Hands up, I confess. I've gone, not for worrying about now, but when you have a moment, why did I send it then? If I'm saying don't worry about it for now, I've just blatantly told you on a Friday night.
Well, and the thing is, you don't necessarily know how that person who that email drops in their inbox is going to respond to it. So you don't know whether they're the kind of person who is going to say, oh, it's fine, it's only Jackie.
I'll deal with it Monday, yeah.
I'll deal with it whenever, it's fine. Or they're the kind of person who's going, oh my God, I've done something wrong. She's really cross with me. So in order to prevent, this is a really easy win. Just don't do it.
Don't do it. I've got it. It's finally sort of the light bulbs happened at age 42. Thank you.
Well, happy to help. But no, and we live. The bottom line is mainly we get to do something that we enjoy for a living, and we have definitely said this before on this podcast. And how amazing is that? But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't still treat it as a job. I think theatre would benefit from a bit more job-like mentality, because sometimes crossing those boundaries is okay. It's fine. We've all worked through a lunch hour, back to our original example. And, we're still here. It's fine. And we've had a sandwich and we've had a coffee and we've had a chat to somebody else and we've sent some emails. Great. Happy days. But sometimes crossing those boundaries has meant that it's not been so light and easy. And maybe somebody's, absolutely exhausted, or somebody's really traumatized by having to do something. I just think that it's not as straightforward as maybe I was making it out to be. I choose to work through my lunch break, but by doing that, am I then saying, without saying it, that everybody else has to work through their lunch break? And what if they've got something really important that they need to go and do, or just for some fresh air? Oh my God, just some fresh air. And I think, am I sending out a dangerous message to other people? I think we need to retain flexibility. That's a different thing. I think if anything, the coronavirus situation has taught a lot of employers that you can be more flexible in your working practice. I think that's good. But I feel like we're really great at keeping actors on track in terms of the hours and the job role, but it's normally at the detriment of our own working hours. And wouldn't that be amazing if that wasn't the case? We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand By Please. Join us next time when we'll be talking about our favourite bits of stage management kit. Until then, Jackie and Antonia, off comms.